projects to present, and the first one is the project where we use convolutional neural networks to detect patterns in the process models. And so basically all of my 2 projects today is connected to the understanding, better understanding and analysis of processes. And I performed it with my supervisor software engineering department and the process agnostic information system lab in the Faculty of Computer Science in HC. So let's start. The agenda for first part is the key definitions and of the process mining discipline and the goals and objectives of this study. Then we will talk about the neural network configuration and the event log encoding, how we process events with the help of CNN. Then we talk about the algorithms and their implementation, and in the end of the talk will be some experiments evaluation and the results. So there are a lot of processes going on around us. Some of them are still only presented on a paper and cannot be analyzed, but more and more, most of the processes are performed using some information technologies events and some simple events like going to the doctor or some some government's systems. Also, a lot of IT infrastructure is involved, so we can better understand the processes, analyze them, and see the events and the steps that are performed during the process executions. And to analyze different processes, there is a special discipline for this called process mining, that basically is the bridge between 2 big other disciplines, which is the process science, which is the model-based process analysis. And here by model, I mean, and I understand not some neural networks, but more like Petri nets, finite state machines, BPMN models, and Turing machine like this. And the other discipline that is partly included in process mining is data science, where we operate with some statistics and algorithms to better understand our data. And this is how process mining field looks like. Basically, we have some processes, and we accumulate information about them in some databases in the form like event logs. And with such logs, we can perform different tasks. The first, and to my opinion, is the main task of process mining is a task of enhancement, where we have some process. We try to understand how it's performed, and we try to understand bottlenecks in the process and how we can make the process more efficient, reduce some additional costs, and like this. There are other tasks that include enhancement is the enhancement of a process model. What I mean here is when we have some process and we build a model of this process like Petri net or finite state machine of it, we need to understand how good this process model, for example, Petri net, is describing the real process. Are the events that are presented in real processes presented in this process model, and the sequence of events that are presented in the real processes, can they appear in this process model? So this is the task of process model enhancement. But first of all, to enhance some process, we have to synthesize it. And this is the second task of process mining. And the third but not least, task of process mining is conformance checking, where we try to understand how well and how aligned our real model and the real process. And the task that we are trying to solve is pattern discovery that, as I think, relates to the task of synthesis and conformance checking. There are some key concepts of process mining. 3 of them are quite widely accepted, and the fourth one is the concept that we present here in this project. So, but let's start with some basics. First one is activity. Activity is simply some specific action that is performed as a part of a business process. For example, when you go to the doctor, you make an appointment. So making an appointment is an activity. But when some actor executes this activity, like me, Maxim, going to the doctor and making an appointment, such activity becomes an event. So event is the execution of some activity. The second definition is trace, and it's simply the sequence of activities that are executed during some processes. And the last one is event log, which is a multi-set of a set of event traces, or just simply the set of different traces. And to give you an example, let's see some simple event log of process where we refund our ticket. And let's look closely at it. So the activity here is ticket verification. It presented in the first and second traces. And this is some abstract action that can be performed in the process. When the actor performs such action, it becomes an event. So in the second trace in in 11th of December of year 2022, when task ticket verification was executed, this became an event. And the trace is the sequences that are in the orange block that were performed during some business process. And we collect when we collect them in some kind of array or list, we get the trace of events. So the fourth concept that is presented here by us is a prefix trace. What we understand by prefix trace, it's a subsequence of a trace formed from its beginning. And basically from the trace of length L, from the trace where we have L events, we can perform and obtain L prefix traces. Let's also look closely to some example. Example is here. So let's say we have a prefix trace that is, let's say we have a trace that is presented here that contains some events. I just shortened the name of events from the previous slide, so it better fits to the slide here. And if we want to create a prefix trace 3, we basically just take 3 first events of a trace and perform, and we obtain the prefix trace with index 3. And by doing so, we can perform 7 prefix traces from our trace, because this trace has 7 events, and we can perform 7 prefix traces out of this. So we, I hope, understood some basic concepts of process mining. And the next concept I want you to show is the behavioral patterns. And this simply is some structural component of a process, a high-level construct that reflects some occurring patterns and sequences of events in some process. And we can show such behavioral patterns with the help of process models, like here the Petri net. And this is basically the objective and tasks of our research. We would like to develop a method that would allow us to perform pattern analysis without synthesizing any process model by itself. And there are several tasks we need to achieve this goal. And mostly in the process mining nowadays, a lot of algorithmic approaches are used, and neural networks are not so really spread. So in our study, we decided that we would like to use deep learning to achieve and perform our task. So our study proposes a new method to this problem. And among the different deep learning models, we selected convolutional neural networks because, yeah, they may be a little bit simple, but still effective, lightweight, and can be easily executed in any software. So there are some basic concepts about convolutional neural networks. I guess you understand it really well, so we will go through them really quickly. The first one is a convolution, and the convolutional layer is in the convolutional neural networks. And the basic idea between convolution is filters. And filters are not a new thing in the convolutional networks. They been before convolutional neural networks. And here is a horizontal Sobel filter that allows to get the horizontal lines from the image. But this filter is handcrafted. And the idea of convolutional neural networks that we don't need to craft such filters by ourselves. We let neural network to decide how this filter would be performed and which patterns this filter would find. So it is written also here. How convolution is done is shown like this in this slide. We basically just split our input matrix that can be an image or something different to some parts, apply our filters to them with some shift, and get the new matrices out of them. So the process looks like this. And the most important thing about convolution is that they are shift invariant, which means that if the pattern is presented, some pattern is presented in the different parts of the image, we still, with the same filter, we still would find it, and this is really useful for us. And this is the formula how the convolutions are done. The second layer and the feature of CNN is pooling, which is a quite simple operation where you define where you select some areas of your matrix, divide it to some parts, and take some statistic out of this part. Here is max pooling, where we divide our matrix to blocks 2 or 2 and select the max element out of them. And the last feature is fully connected layers that are presented in CNN. Is basically a multi-layer perceptron where each output is a linear model of some inputs. And having such linear model plus some bias and activation function like ReLU, we get a neuron. So the neural network architecture used in our project is quite simple, based on the VGG model. It contains several convolutional layers and 2 fully connected layers and the end of the network. And moving forward to the representation of event logs, as we have convolutional networks, we have to pass the processes to it and make some matrix based on the processes. So convolutional network would analyze them. And among different, actually 11 different approaches that we defined, we selected an approach called image data engineering. And here and in some slides in the forward, we will better understand how it's done. But basically, what you need to understand is that, let's say we have a finite set of activities in our business process, let's say denoted by the set A, and that every activity, when it performed in some business process, has a timestamp. So two main features of every event is that it belongs to some activity from the finite set of activities, and this has this event has some timestamp. And as an example, let's look closely at the trace that is presented in this event log, the trace with ID number 1. So what we do at the first place, we collect all the events in the same trace, and we sort them by their execution times, from the earliest one to the latest. Then we perform prefix trace. We obtain some prefix traces out of this trace and create such matrix. What is important about this matrix? First of all, that all the columns here are responsible for some activities from our set of activities. Like here, RTV, like ticket verification, or TI, ticket investigation. So what is important here is that column order cannot be changed, and every column is responsible for some activity. And what is also important here is that, I guess it will be seen better in this slide, is that for every activity, for every event presented in a prefix trace, we simply calculate how often it was shown in our process log. Sorry. So here event RR and activity RR appeared once, and in the first line here we add 1 to the RR column and zeros for the others one. And sorry, I don't know what's going on. And for the other prefix trace with ID 5, we see that event TV appeared twice, and that's why here we have 2 in this column. Event TI also appeared twice, so we add 2 here, and event RR appeared once, and here is 1. So we basically calculate how many times every activity appeared in the process by some prefix trace. And by doing so, we obtain for every trace, we obtain such matrices, and out of them we can create images like this. So what we do to obtain such images, we just simply normalize this matrix, the value of this matrix from 0 to 2025, and then make an image of grayscale. When we use this method of data engineering, we use it when we work with the neural network, when we train it, and also in the inference stage. So the creation of training data set. To test our method for pattern identification, we selected several examples of patterns that are common in process mining models, patterns from the classification presented by Elham Ramizani and Will van der Aalst. These are the patterns. And what we did with them, we created Petri nets for every pattern here. And for every pattern, where we obtained synthetic traces out of these models. Then we converted these traces to the images, and based on these images, we had 4 classes, and we trained our model to understand based on the image which this image. There are some details about model training. It was done with the Adam optimizer. There were several 10 epochs for this model. And we achieved the following result. When we tested our model, we not only tested it on the one pattern presented on the image, but for several patterns presented on some image in some process trace. And what we get is that mostly model correctly detects all the pattern presented in the process trace, but sometimes incorrectly adds some other patterns that are actually not presented in a trace, and sometimes misses the results. So to get some metrics, we calculated the following ones, and the result is the following. For some events, mostly we get good results, where we get the highest metric value, but in some cases, model just simply randomly predicts, and there is a place to enhance this analysis. So the conclusion of this work is that model usually effectively identifies the presence of a pattern that are truly presented in the data, but sometimes mistakenly detect patterns that are actually absent in the trace. This can be the issue of overlapping, and the other issue is that when we combine some patterns, they form a new pattern, and model can detect this new pattern, but we wanted to detect two different ones, like this. The program code is available on GitHub. There are several Python notebooks where you can find how our model and the data and how our model was trained and evaluated. There are several options to enhance this research and to expand it. We can simply expand our data because we didn't have a lot of it, and we had mostly synthetic data that we made by ourselves. And we can also perform some other object or pattern detection methods to better understand and recognize multiple patterns in image simultaneously. That's all for me right now. Thanks.
Thank you, Maxim. Do we have questions? Yeah, we have questions.
Thank you for your presentation. Could you please show us a slide with test results? Could you explain, please, did you have just 2 samples in test split, or what do these numbers mean?
It means here, what it means, that we have a trace where 2 patterns were presented. By patterns, I mean these structures. And number 2 here defines that our model detected all the patterns and detected it correctly. So it detected the presence of RD pattern and the presence of between after before pattern. And for example, number 1 here means that the model also here corrected all the patterns presented in the trace, but mistakenly added some other pattern that are actually not presented here, but model thinks that there are some other patterns presented in a trace, like this.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you for your talk. I've got another question. Why you formulate your task like that? Isn't it more natural to be it like one-dimensional convolution, and maybe in terms of sequences like next token prediction task or something like that? Why it's like two-dimensional convolution if there's no logical explanation why the second dimension is matters?
So about the next token prediction and sequence methods, I actually will have a talk today also about the method that we used to detect patterns in models, and why we formulated the task like this with two-dimensional images is that was just interesting for us whether we can create some new way of depicting our processes, and it was just interesting for us what would the this would be the outcome of this, probably we would be able to perform really well and detect images better than some algorithmic deterministic algorithms. But as you can see, this led to the conclusion that really this is not the best way to detect patterns, and some enhancements should be done to this process like this.
Okay, thank you.